Our story begins with Sakura, an expert martial artist, then the most popular girl in school, who on one fateful night, witnesses a boy seemingly burning people to death with blue flames. Upon seeing this, she immediately gets off the bus and alerts a nearby policeman about what she saw. But when they arrive at the scene of the crime, there seems to be no trace of anything having occurred, but Sakura remains convinced of what she saw. The next day at school, a new transfer student named Ogami is assigned to her class. All the girls immediately begin fawning over him, and it doesn't take long for Ogami to become popular. Everyone seems to be charmed by him except for Sakura, who recognizes Ogami as the same boy she saw burning people the previous night. Later that day, Sakura confronts Ogami about him being a murderer, while the rest of the school mistakenly believes that she's confessing to him. Ogami, however, feigns ignorance to Sakura as questions and claims he was busy at his part-time job the previous night. Seeing that Ogami has no burn marks, Sakura feels compelled to believe him as she begins to wonder if what she saw was truly real. Ogami then leaves, but tells Sakura that he hopes they can become friends. Later that day, Ogami receives a phone call asking if he's made a decision on what to do with Sakura, to which he replies that he'll just have to eliminate her. The next day, while visiting a stray dog in the park, Sakura witnesses a criminal gang attacking a defenseless homeless man. When she intervenes, she realizes that they are members of the ruthless G Falcon gang. Due to their falcon-shaped tattoos, she is able to hold them off with her martial arts for quite a while until she is eventually stung with a taser and kicked repeatedly. The dog she fed earlier tries to protect Sakura, but the gang members nearly kill it by kicking it around. Just when Sakura herself is about to be killed, Ogami shows up seemingly out of nowhere, which surprises the criminals. Upon seeing how bruised and beaten the dog is, Ogami deems that it is beyond saving and puts it out of its misery himself, much to Sakura as horror. He then turns to the gang members and burns one of them alive as he recites his motto, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, and evil for evil. He then offers the remaining criminals a choice: turn themselves into the police or die. The gang members choose death, however, and charge at Ogami, who in response uses his powers to summon blue flames and eradicates them all. Ogami then walks up to the horrified Sakura and tells her he lied when he said he wanted them to be friends as he sets her on fire. Surprisingly, Sakura wakes up in her room the following morning, completely unharmed, but confused about how she's still alive at school. Sakura girls highly cautious of Ogami, despite him acting as if nothing transpired the night before whilst among their peers. However, when Ogami begins following Sakura around school and spying on her, she decides to avoid her best friend in an attempt to protect her from Ogami. Elsewhere, a man named UK is given a picture of his next opponent by someone in a cat costume who refers to UK as number 3. After school soccer, it takes Ogami to a populated area with lots of witnesses, so Ogami can't use his powers and tries to reason with him about killing those men the night before. However, Ogami explains that those men deserve to die as they were evil and that he is the necessary evil that takes care of society's trash. Sakura disagrees with Ogami's sense of justice and is not able to accept how he can commit such acts without feeling any emotion. In response, Ogami further explains that he does not exist and is not bound by human laws and morality, as he is the sixth codebreaker, a person who passes judgment on evildoers via means that would be considered evil to the rest of the world. To prove that he can't be reasoned with, Ogami tries to burn Sakura in the middle of the crowded area, but she flees from fright. However, he grabs her hand before she can escape and tells her that he will keep an eye on her and kill anyone who learns about his true identity to make sure that he does not kill any more people. Sakura promises to keep an eye on him as well. This makes Ogami laugh a bit before he reiterates that he will kill anyone anywhere at any time without exception, and that neither her nor any witnesses are capable of stopping him. Later that day, after Sakura is returned home, Ogami receives a call from a mysterious woman wondering why Sakura is not dead yet, to which Ogami replies that she must not be killed yet as she is a rare person who cannot be burned by his flames, something he's never seen before. Elsewhere, that same day, Yuga encounters Hitomi, the man who was tasked with eliminating who Yuki refers to as number 1. As the men prepare to fight, Yuki recites his motto, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a requiem of fury for evil. Up then proceeds to attack Hitomi with sound waves, but is stopped by a man named Yakina, who has the ability to control ice and uses it to put an end to the fight. The next day Soccer goes to school with Ogami and finds her locker stuffed with love letters from fellow students due to Soccer and Ogami has desires to keep an eye on each other. Students have begun to misunderstand their relationship and believe that they are dating. This jealousy quickly turns into violence, but Soccer prevents the situation from escalating further out of fear of Ogami using his powers elsewhere. A mysterious blonde boy receives a call ordering him to work with Ogami later that day. Ogami gives Sock for a puppy of the dog that tried to protect her as a gift, which makes her happy, but remembering how the dog died just brings her to tears. Afterwards, Soccer goes with Ogami to a local Yakuza office, where he is offered a job to sell illegal goods for them. However, Ogami refuses their offer and burns all the Yakuza members instead, along with 2 corrupt policemen who were there as well. Ogami then goes to a car waiting outside the Yakuza office with a corrupt chief of police inside, who immediately attempts to flee upon noticing Ogami blood despite being wounded. He pursues the corrupt chief of police in order to bring him to justice. Suddenly Toki, the mysterious blondie from earlier, and the 4th codebreaker appears out of nowhere and blows up the car that the chief of police was in by using his powers of magnetism. The next day, Ogami appears before even the Codebreaker Policy Governance Board, where he is given his next job to assassinate a politician named Tabata. Elsewhere, Soccer runs into Toki outside her house, who walks with her to school. However, Ogami suddenly appears and immediately begins to fight Toki until Soccer stops them by grabbing their wrists. Toki then leaves shortly after and Soccer and Ogami head to school together. After school, Ogami and Toki team up to go on a mission together, and Sakura accidentally ends up tagging along after using Tokyo's powers to break into a compound. They find out that this place is housing a government research facility for special abilities, and after dealing with the normal security guards, Ogami and Toki engage in battle with 2 guards wearing unusual backpacks, which grants them the ability to manipulate wind and water during their battle. However, the 2 guards are overwhelmed by Ogami and Toki and are forced to retreat when their backpacks suddenly run dry rather than chase them. Ogami and Toki decide to continue with the mission. Inside the facility, Soccer learns that the Codebreakers are actually a government agency run directly under the command of the Prime Minister of Japan. This facility houses kids with special abilities hooked up to machines for close monitoring, and the lower levels of the facility are used for even more inhumane experiments that are performed on the children. Tabata, the politician that Ogami had been ordered to kill, is revealed to be the head of this research facility. Suddenly the 2 guards return and resume their fight with Origami and Toki, who both quickly discovered that the backpacks each contain a child with special abilities inside. After killing the guards, the 2 children that were inside the backpacks are finally put to rest. Ogami then goes to kill Tabata, but moments before he does, Tabata's crippled daughter Sisa appears. It turns out that Tabata had performed such inhumane experiments in hopes of finding suitable transplants for Siso, who also has special abilities. Sakura tries to convince Ogami not to kill Tabata by protecting him with her body, but he spits in the face of her mercy by trying to attack Ogami with a scalpel, giving Ogami no choice but to kill him. She's mourning her father's death, attempts to use her powers to hurt Ogami but is unable to harm him. In response, Ogami gives her permission to someday take revenge on him and walks away. Meanwhile, Toki finds out that he told me Codebreaker Number 1 is the real man of Japan. He is reminded that he became a codebreaker in order to keep his sister away from danger. Elsewhere, while Soccer and Ogami head to school together, they run into Codebreaker Number 5, who is nicknamed Prince. Despite being a girl, she gives Ogami strict orders to protect Soccer at all costs at school. Ogami notices that the class is acting strangely, which causes him to suspect, but Soccer has exposed his secret as a codebreaker. However, it turns out that the class was actually just preparing a welcome party for Ogami. At that same time, Toki has seen collapsing in pain in an alley somewhere else, and the Prime Minister is informed that a total of 43 agents have gone missing in search of Hitomi back at the party. The school is attacked by the 43 missing agents, whose dead bodies have been reanimated thanks to Hitomi's ability to manipulate electricity while fighting the dead agents. Ogami momentarily collapses due to using too much of his power. Suddenly misconduct. A teacher at their school reveals herself as an agent of Eden assigned to assist Ogami and helps fight off the agents. Yuki also appears shortly after to assist them in fending off the attack. Masa Omi, a classmate of Soccer and Ogami and Codebreaker Number 2, joins the fight as well and successfully defeats the agents using his light manipulation. Despite winning this fight, Toki is still shown collapsed, but is now in the form of a child. Later, Soccer learns that Ogami has collapsed, has caused him to enter his last form. due to the overuse of his powers. This last form state will last 24 hours and the symptoms vary for each code breaker. In Obama's case, this state causes him to suffer from hypothermia. In an effort to help soccer, volunteers are housed as a secure location for Obame to recover when soccer brings the gang there. They are welcomed by her father, who turns out to be the head of a highly respected Yakuza clan called the Kitsukura. They arrive at the guest house. It's revealed that Toki is already there, but he's in his last form that causes him to age regress, which explains his childlike appearance. While Obama is resting, the others have a feast together and celebrate along with the other Yakuza members. At night, Muscle Omi informs Toki that he told me might be targeting both Ogami and Soccer, but he has no idea why. The next morning, Prince is ordered to go to Soccer, his house, to provide support for both Ogami and Toki. Suddenly, he told me raid Soccer's house in order to kidnap her, and the codebreakers do their best to fight back against his electrical attacks. He told me then unleashes his full power against them, but Soccer jumps in front of his attack and is surprisingly unharmed. He told me he doesn't seem too fazed by this, however, as he explains that this attack was just a decoy to gather all the codebreakers in one area, thus leaving an opening for Yukihina to kidnap the Prime Minister. After he told me flees, the codebreakers discuss what their next plan of action should be. Toki leaves during their conversation, however, as he has no interest in rescuing his father, while the Yakuza members who were injured during his homie's attack are having their wounds treated. Soccer finds Ogami. Looking through her family photo album, it's revealed that Soccer, his parents, adopted her as a child after finding her outside on their doorstep one night with blood splattered all over her, and did their best to raise her as a normal child despite her unusual surroundings. Meanwhile, Yuki, who has turned into a cat as part of his lost form, reminisces with Prince about when he told me used to be a good guy. When Toki returns, Sakura and the other codebreakers head out in search of Hitomi and the Prime Minister. Later on, Masa only meets with Prince at a bridge and immediately attacks her when she figures out that he is a part of Hitomi's plan. However, Yuki witnesses Masa Omi attack Prince from afar. After his fight with Prince, Masa Omi appears in front of Sakura and tricks her into following him, leading her directly to Hitomi, his hideout, where the Prime Minister is also being held hostage. Masa Omi hands Soccer over as a gesture of goodwill in order to join sides with Hitomi. Shortly after, all the codebreakers receive anonymous messages detailing Hitomi. His location up then rejoins the group and informs Ogami of Masa Amin's betrayal, and to proceed to Hitomi, his hideout together. Once they're up, holds off Masa Omi while Ogami continues forward to confront Hitomi and hopefully rescue Soccer. Once Soccer is freed, he told me shows his clock collection on the wall and explains that each clock is stopped at a time when a former codebreaker was killed. He told me further explains that he plans to execute the Prime Minister, but he first bombs the city full of civilians as a spectacle to expose codebreakers in order for them to become recognized as great heroes rather than dangerous outcasts. However, Ogami disagrees with Hitomi's cause and burns all the clocks, but as Ogami attempts to attack Hitomi, Yukino arrives out of nowhere and intervenes by taking the Prime Minister with him. Although Rami is unable to do anything, since his flames cannot melt up his ice, Toki arrives just in time to save Ogami and Soccer from a mirage of ice as the hideout begins to collapse. Everyone leaves, but when they accidentally split up, Soccer enters the car with Hitomi, Masa Omi, and Yakaina inside, hoping to prevent them from killing the Prime Minister. In a flashback, we see that when he told me was 16 years old, he was inaugurated as Codebreaker Number 6, and due to his excellence at his job, he was considered for a promotion. 4 years later, he told me his unnamed partner, who was Codebreaker Number 5 at the time, was killed during an operation, and his watch stopped working the exact moment he died. He told me he was then promoted as the new Codebreaker Number 5, but he was still greatly troubled by his partner's death. When he told me he was eventually promoted to Codebreaker Number 1, he was tasked with training the future codebreakers, which included Yuki, Toki, Prince, and Ogami. However, he told me to concern with Ogami his primary focus of eliminating evil without thought of any consequences. He told me later told Ogami that their purpose should be protecting the powerless and not simply killing the wicked. Sometime later, Masa Omi informed he told me that codebreakers could die if they overused their own powers numerous times, which was something Eden had kept hidden from them. So after years of being treated by Eden like nothing more than a tool for killing, he told me silently vowed to get revenge on the very organization that taught him how to kill. Back in the present, he told me announces to the public from the top of the Tokyo Sky Tower that he will kill the Prime Minister and 50,000 other civilians across Japan when the timer runs out. Meanwhile, the codebreakers continue to search for Hitomi but are unsuccessful as bombs continue to detonate throughout Japan. The codebreakers, the Japanese government and the Kisa Korea Yakuza clan all receive anonymous emails detailing the locations of the bombs and of Hitomi Toki and Miscanthus set off to Sky Tower while Yuki goes out to search for and disable as many bombs as he can. Mogami arrives at the Sky Tower first in order to rescue Sakura, but he told me catches him before he can hold Rami, fills his blade with his blue flames and charges at Hitomi the two engage in an intense battle, but Ogami's blue flames are soon overwhelmed by Hitomi. Is electricity as Sakura manages to free herself. He told me reveals to them that the Prime Minister attempted to have him killed in order to prevent him from exposing the codebreakers. You told me then states his desire to make a world where people with special abilities can live happily and free and not as government dogs. Meanwhile, Toki and Miss Konda are stopped by Masa Omi, who faces Toki in a fierce duel of light powers versus magnetic powers. At that same time, the Japanese government and the Kisa Korea Yakuza clan begin to evacuate locations with bombs, but they are unfortunately too short on personnel to help everywhere. Meanwhile, it told me reveals to Ogami, who is standing on the brink of defeat, that the people that Ogami has killed thus far on behalf of Eton were simply ones that had helped Hitomi in one way or another rather than purely evil individuals. Despite this, Ogami refuses to join Hitomi and promises to protect the innocent until the very end. However, Ogami goes into his last form when he tries to attack Hitomi once more. Sakura desperately tries to protect him from Hitomi, who grabs her by the throat, but when the timer reaches 0, no detonation occurs. This is thanks to Masa Omi, who told Yuki where the bomb his cause. Meanwhile, Toki reluctantly rescues his father after threatening to kill him. Ogami then re-enters the fight by removing his thumb ring, which causes his power to rise exponentially, and as they fight Ogami reminisces about his first training session with Hitomi. Surprisingly, Origami's blue flames manage to absorb Hitomi's strongest electricity blasts, which results in both of them collapsing, and when he told me gets back up in an attempt to continue his plan. He is swiftly knocked back down by Ogami. As he lies defeated and says his last words to all the codebreakers, Hitomi encourages them to make themselves public as the ones who defeated him. However, the Prime Minister appears suddenly and says that their identities must remain secret, and enraged, Hitomi attempts to kill the Prime Minister. But he told me his powers begin to eat him from the inside out and he dies from the overuse of his powers. As Obame holds a dead he told me in his arms, he thinks that Hitomi got the justice he deserved in the end. Despite this, the other codebreakers still mourn his death. Meanwhile, Toki overhears the public crediting the police department for disabling the bombs and killing Hitomi with no mentions of the codebreakers. Later on, Masa Omi and the Prime Minister discuss how they succeeded in having Ogami battle Hitomi to draw out his true power and how they will need to use Sakura to extinguish his flames if he ever goes out of control. Masami then smiles as the Prime Minister begins to cough up blood. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you all again in the next one.